My twin sister was the favorite, and my parents kicked me out at 16 to give my room to her baby. I lived in a tent in the yard while they watched from inside. But years later, I discovered they stole $150,000 of my inheritance, and I sued them for everything. I'm 28 years old, work in property management, and honestly never thought I'd be telling this story, but I need to get it off my chest, because what my parents did to me basically haunted me my entire life, until I was finally able to close that chapter about 6 months ago. I guess I should start from the beginning, from when I was born, because that's where everything started going wrong. You know, I'm a twin. I have a twin sister named Hannah, and for as long as I can remember, my parents made it very clear that she was the daughter they wanted, and I don't know, like an accident or something. It's not like they said it in those exact words when we were really young, but actions speak louder than words, right? Hannah always got new clothes, while I got whatever didn't fit her anymore. And when I say always, I mean literally every birthday, every Christmas, every occasion. She had her own room decorated with posters and nice furniture, and I slept in a room that was basically the storage closet where they kept boxes and old stuff, with a single bed pushed against the wall. My mom would take Hannah to get her hair cut at a professional salon, and she'd cut mine herself in the kitchen with some dull scissors she used for everything. When Hannah wanted dance classes or piano lessons, my parents found the money from wherever, but when I asked to join the school track team, they'd tell me they couldn't afford the fees, that there was no budget, maybe next year. The only, and when I say only, I really mean it, the only member of my family who treated me like I was worth something was my grandfather, my mom's dad. He lived like 2 hours away, but he'd come visit every 2 or 3 months, and every time he came, he'd bring something special for me, like a book he knew I'd like, or chocolates, or he'd just sit with me and ask how I was doing in school, what I was learning, if I had friends, normal things that parents should ask, but mine never did. I remember, once, I must have been like 12 years old. Grandpa pulled me aside and told me, "I know things aren't easy for you in this house, but I want you to know that you're special and you're going to do great things with your life." At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant, but now I do. Now I understand it perfectly. Everything got worse when I was like 14 years old, and Grandpa started getting sick. He had cancer. I think it was lung cancer or something, and he deteriorated fast. Like in a matter of months, he went from being relatively okay to being hospitalized all the time. My parents would take Hannah to visit him at the hospital, but they'd leave me at home saying someone had to stay and watch the house, which was an obvious lie, because the house didn't need watching. They just didn't want to take me. I managed to visit him like twice before he died, and I remember on the last visit he grabbed my hand with that strength people have when they know they're dying, and he told me, "Everything's going to be okay. You'll see. Trust me." And he died like a week later. I had just turned 15, and honestly, I felt like I'd lost the only ally I had in the world. After the funeral, things at my house continued just as bad. I mean, Hannah was still the princess and I was still invisible, but at least I had school, and my own plans to get out of there as soon as I turned 18 and could legally leave. I was getting good grades, not because my parents motivated me, but because I knew it was my ticket out. You know what I mean? But then, like 6 months after Grandpa died, Hannah started acting weird, like with morning sickness and sleeping more than normal. And me being her twin, I obviously noticed, even though she tried to hide it. One day my parents took her to the doctor, and when they came back, I could hear from my room all the screaming and drama, because it turns out Hannah, who was 16 years old, same as me obviously, was pregnant. The thing is, Hannah had been secretly dating this guy who was, I think he was, Frank? No, wait, that's another character in this story. The boyfriend was named something different, but it doesn't matter. Basically, he was a 19-year-old guy who worked at a mechanic shop or something, a dead-end job. And my parents were furious at first, but after like 2 days of drama, they decided they were going to support her completely, that they were going to help her with the baby, that they were going to make everything work because that's what family does, blah blah blah. I never heard a single word of disappointment directed at Hannah after those first days. It was all unconditional support and plans for the baby's future. And this is where my life went completely to shit. Sorry for the expression, but there's no other way to say it. My parents decided the baby needed its own room, which makes sense, right? But instead of converting the storage closet where I slept into the baby's room, or instead of having Hannah share her huge room with the baby, at least temporarily, My parents decided that I had to leave so the baby could have my room. And when I say leave, I don't mean move to another room in the house. I mean leave the house completely. I was 16 years old, still in high school, and my father literally told me one day after school, "You have until the weekend to get your stuff out because we need your room for your nephew or niece." I just stood there in total shock thinking, is this really happening? Are they kicking me out of the house? I said, and where am I supposed to go? And my mother, who was standing there with her arms crossed, said something like, "You're 16 years old already. You're old enough to figure it out on your own. Your sister needs you, and this family needs to make room for the new baby." I tried to reason with them. I told them I was still in school, that I had no job or money, that it wasn't even technically legal to kick me out like that. But my father just said, "Either you leave on your own or we call the police and say you're uncontrollable and threatening us." I had no options, literally none. So that weekend, I packed everything I had into 2 suitcases and a backpack, which wasn't much because, like I said, I never had many things of my own. And I left that house thinking, what am I going to do now? I didn't have friends close enough to ask to stay at their house. Like I had classmates, but nothing deep because I'd always been kind of a loner because of all the family drama. I ended up setting up a tent, an old camping tent I found in the garage before leaving, in the backyard of the house. Because technically they couldn't stop me from being on the property even if they wouldn't let me in the house, I guess. I lived in that damn tent for months, and we're talking about fall going into winter, with temperatures dropping below freezing at night. I kept going to school every day because I knew if I dropped out of school I was completely screwed, and I'd shower in the gym locker rooms, before classes, wash my clothes in the public bathroom sink when I could, charge my phone in the school outlets because obviously I had no electricity in the tent. I lost like 10 kilos during those months because I didn't have enough food. I was basically eating whatever I could get free at school, and sometimes I'd steal granola bars from the convenience store near the house, which made me feel horrible, but I was hungry, you know? My parents could see me from the house windows living in that tent in the backyard, and never, not once, did they come out to see how I was or offer me even a hot meal. The thing that saved me, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it literally saved me, was that I started working at a bakery called Frank's Bakery, run by an older man named Frank, who was gruff but had a good heart. I walked in one day looking for work, like desperate, and I told him I could do anything, clean, wash dishes, whatever he needed, and he looked me up and down with that distrustful, old man face and said, "How old are you?" I told him I was 16 but that I was hardworking and responsible, and I don't know if he saw something in me or what, but he gave me a chance. I started doing cleaning and bread deliveries, working after school and on weekends, earning minimum wage, but at least it was something. Frank never asked me directly about my situation, but I think he figured out something was wrong, because after like 2 months working there, he told me, "Listen, I have a room above the bakery that's empty. It only has a bed and a small bathroom, but if you want, you can stay there. I'm not going to charge you rent, but you'll have to work extra hours to compensate." I almost started crying right there in the middle of the bakery, because after months living in a tent freezing every night, the idea of having a room with a roof and heating sounded like a 5-star palace. I moved that same day, carried my 2 suitcases and backpack up the back stairs of the bakery, and settled into that little room that smelled like fresh-baked bread all the time, and it was the first night in months that I really slept, without waking up every hour shaking from cold. I lived above that bakery for the next 2 years, working for Frank and doing my best to finish high school, which I managed, although my grades dropped quite a bit because I was exhausted all the time. I got another part-time job at a gas station doing night shifts on weekends, and basically my whole life was work and sleep, no rest. Every penny I earned, I saved. Saved everything except the bare minimum needed for food and basic products, because I had this goal in my head that someday I was going to have my own house, my own space where nobody could ever kick me out again. During all this time, and we're talking about years, my parents never tried to contact me, never asked how I was, nothing. Occasionally, I'd see them in town, like at the supermarket or on the street, and they'd look at me and keep walking like I didn't exist. Once I saw Hannah with the baby, who was a boy, I think, at the park, and she saw me and literally grabbed the stroller and went in the opposite direction. That hurt. I'm not going to lie, because despite everything, she was still my twin sister. But at the same time, it made me realize that those people really didn't want me in their lives, and that I had to build my own life without them. I kept working like crazy for years, added a 3rd job at a restaurant washing dishes at night on weekdays, and my routine was literally wake up at 5 inches the morning to work at the bakery. Go to my main job during the day, at an administrative office I got after graduating, and then go to the restaurant at night. I slept like 4 or 5 hours a night and lived on coffee and pure willpower. Frank would scold me all the time, saying I was going to get sick working so much, but I was obsessed with my goal of saving enough money to buy a house. It took like 6 years from when they kicked me out. I mean, I was 22 years old at this point, but I finally managed to save enough for the down payment on a small house. It wasn't anything fancy, like a 3-bedroom house in a normal neighborhood. Nothing elegant, but it was mine, completely mine. Nobody could take it from me. The day I signed the papers and got the keys, I sat on the floor of the empty living room and cried for hours. I don't know if from happiness or exhaustion or relief that I'd finally gotten to this point after so many years of struggle. Another 6 years passed. We're getting to the present now. I was 28 years old, just turned, living in my house that I'd already furnished and made my own, working at a decent property management job that paid well and that I liked, and I thought I'd finally left all that family drama behind. And then, one Saturday afternoon, I'm at my house doing cleaning and watching movies, and the doorbell rings. I open the door, and there they are. My parents, Hannah, with her son who was now like 12 years old, and Hannah's husband who was still the same guy with no ambition working temporary jobs. My father, who hadn't spoken a word to me in over a decade, has the nerve to smile and say, "Hi, honey, we've missed you. Can we come in?" And I just stand there completely frozen thinking, is this really happening? After over 10 years they show up like nothing? I say, "What do you want?" And my mother starts this long story about how they've had financial problems, that they lost their house, that they have nowhere to stay, and that since I have this big house with 3 bedrooms, surely there's room for family. The word family made me laugh, like a bitter laugh I couldn't contain. And I say, "Family? You're talking to me about family after kicking me out at 16? After letting me live in a tent in the backyard for months? After not speaking to me for over a decade?" Hannah tries to jump in saying something like, "You know you've always been part of the family. There were just some misunderstandings when we were younger." And that made me so furious. I felt like I was going to explode. I told them, "Get off my property right now or I'm calling the police." And my father completely changes tone and starts getting aggressive, saying I'm ungrateful, that after everything they did for me, this is how I repay them. And I literally laughed in his face and said, "Everything you did for me? You mean kicking me out when I was a minor? Ignoring me my whole life? You don't owe me anything and I don't owe you anything. Now leave." I slammed the door in their faces, locked it, and I could hear them out there yelling for like 10 minutes before they finally left. I thought that was the end of it, that they'd gotten the message. But oh no, my dear parents had other plans. Like 2 weeks later, I get a legal notice at my door, and it turns out Hannah had filed a lawsuit trying to claim that the house was technically family property because supposedly my parents had given me money to buy it, which was an absolute and blatant lie because I had worked 3 jobs for years to save every penny of the down payment and every monthly payment. I had to hire a lawyer. Her name was Karen, and she was a no-nonsense woman I liked immediately. And when I told her the whole story, she said, "I need to review all your financial records and documents to prove you bought this house on your own." While Karen was reviewing all my financial history and house documents, she discovered something that left me completely shocked, like I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It turns out that when my grandfather died, he had left me a pretty substantial inheritance in his will. We're talking about like $150,000, something like that I was supposed to receive when I turned 18. But my parents, since they were the executors of the will and I was a minor when he died, had forged documents saying the money would be used for my education and care, and had kept all the damn money. Karen found the bank records showing the money had gone directly into my parents' account and that they'd spent it on who knows what, probably on Hannah and the baby who's now a 1-2-year-old kid. When Karen told me this, I felt physically sick, like I had to run to the bathroom because I felt like I was going to throw up. Not only had they treated me like garbage my whole life, not only had they kicked me out when I was a teenager, but they had also stolen the inheritance that my grandfather, the only family member who loved me, had left specifically to me. That inheritance would have completely changed my life. I could have gone to college. I wouldn't have had to work 3 jobs and live above a bakery. I would have had real options. And they just stole it, and never told me anything. Karen told me, "We have a solid case to countersue for fraud and theft, and we can go after them for the full amount plus interest and damages." I was so angry, So absolutely furious that I said yes, immediately, that I wanted us to take them to court for everything they'd done to me. My parents and Hannah probably thought I didn't have the means to fight legally, that I was going to accept some minor settlement just to get them to go away, but they were completely wrong. The case went to trial like 3 months later, and it was surreal to sit in that courtroom watching my parents on the other side with their cheap lawyer who clearly didn't know what he was doing. Karen presented all the documents showing that I had bought the house completely on my own with legitimately earned money, including pay stubs from my 3 jobs, bank deposit records, everything. Then she presented the evidence of fraud with the inheritance, showing the forged documents and bank transfer records, and I could see my parents getting paler and paler as Karen presented each piece of evidence. Hannah withdrew her ridiculous lawsuit about the house after seeing all the evidence against them, probably her. Lawyer told her she had no case, but my countersuit went forward. The judge, an older woman who seemed pretty annoyed with my parents, heard the whole case over 2 full days. My parents tried to argue that they'd used the inheritance money for my benefit when I was a minor, but Karen brought records showing exactly what it had been spent on, including mortgage payments on their house, a new car for Hannah when she turned 18, expensive furniture, trips, basically everything except things for me. When the judge issued her verdict, it was one of the best moments of my life. I'm not going to lie. She basically told my parents they were negligent and fraudulent, that they'd violated their fiduciary duty as executors of the will, and that they owed me the full amount of the inheritance plus interest accumulated over more than 10 years, plus additional damages for the fraud. The total came to almost $400,000. Considering all the interest and damages, my parents almost fainted, right there in the courtroom. The judge gave them a payment plan that was basically going to bankrupt them, and warned them that if they tried to hide assets or failed to comply with the payments, they'd go to jail for contempt of court. She also ordered that Hannah and her family had no rights to my property and couldn't approach me or contact me under threat of restraining order. I walked out of that courthouse feeling something I'd never felt before, like a mixture of vindication and justice and pride, because finally someone in authority had recognized that what they did to me was wrong, that it wasn't just me being dramatic or sensitive like my parents always wanted to make me believe. It's been 6 months since the verdict, and my parents have been making the payments because apparently the judge scared them so much they don't dare not comply. I've received like 3 payments so far, and Karen is monitoring everything to make sure they comply. I completely cut off contact with all of them, changed my phone number, blocked all their social media, basically erased them from my life completely. Frank, who's now like 75 years old but still runs the bakery, called me when he found out about all the legal drama and told me he was proud of me, which made me cry because basically he's been more of a father to me than my biological father ever was. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about everything I went through, about those months living in the tent, about the years working to exhaustion, about all the times I felt completely alone with nobody supporting me. But then I look around my house that I bought myself with my own effort, and I think about the judge's verdict and the payments that are coming in, and I feel something like peace, I guess. It's not that I've forgotten or forgiven. I'll never forget or forgive what they did to me. But at least now I have justice and I can move forward knowing I built a life for myself without them, that despite everything they tried to do to destroy me, I survived and even thrived. Last week I was at the bakery having coffee with Frank. Because even though I haven't worked there in years, I still go visit him often. And he asked me if I ever thought about having my own family someday, like a partner and kids. I told him honestly, I don't know. That the idea of family still makes me nervous after everything, but that maybe someday when I've healed more. Frank told me something I won't forget. He said, "Family isn't always the people you share blood with. Sometimes it's the people you choose and who choose you." And I guess he's right, because he and Karen and some other people I've met over these years have treated me with more love and respect than my biological family gave me in my entire life. And that's enough for now.